There was a time when the American backyard had a shared purpose. It was not just empty space behind a house, and it certainly was not only there to look neat from the kitchen window. In many families, it was where tomatoes climbed homemade stakes, where children learned to pick beans before dinner, where grandfathers sharpened tools in wooden sheds, where grandmothers knew how to make food last well beyond the summer. For many families, gardening was part work, part ritual, and part family life. So what happened to that backyard? And why did millions of Americans quietly stop using it that way? Not every American home had exactly the same kind of backyard, but for a huge number of families, especially in the decades stretching from the post-war years into the 1970s and 1980s, a certain kind of backyard became almost universal. It was the quarter-acre suburban lot behind a single-family home, with a stretch of lawn, a vegetable patch along the fence, maybe a fruit tree or two, and enough room for a swing set, a barbecue, and a clothesline. This was the backyard millions of Americans grew up with, the one that shaped how an entire generation remembers home. Of course, not every family had a backyard, but the common American backyard, the one most people picture when they think back to that era, was this suburban version, practical, personal, and deeply woven into everyday life. It was not a showpiece. It was the place where a family spent its Saturdays, fed itself in small but meaningful ways, and built the routines that later became memories. It was where people worked after their regular jobs ended, where they raised food that mattered to the household budget, where they shared time with neighbors over a low fence, trading vegetables, tools, and small talk. And it was where children absorbed the routines that would later shape how they thought about food, responsibility, and family life itself, often without realizing they were learning anything at all. That is part of why people still remember it so vividly today. Decades later, even those who now live in apartments or cities far from any yard, not because every backyard was perfect, and not because every family lived exactly the same way, but because the backyard people remember had a clear place in the rhythm of home. It was useful, it was familiar, and in many cases it was deeply tied to the way families saw themselves and the values they wanted to pass down. Over time, though, that role began to change, quietly and gradually, until the backyard itself started to mean something different than it once did. Every backyard had a purpose, and for many families, that purpose was obvious the moment you stepped outside the back door. In the middle of the 20th century, especially in suburban America, a backyard was often not designed as a decorative space first. It was designed as a space that could do something useful for the household. Day after day, season after season, some families grew tomatoes, green beans, cucumbers, and squash in neat rows along the fence line. Some had berry bushes tucked into corners, apple trees offering shade in summer and fruit in fall, or grapevines climbing along a trellis someone had built by hand. Some kept a compost pile quietly breaking down kitchen scraps and yard waste at the back of the property. Some had a shed holding everything from rakes to mason jars, a clothesline strung between two poles, or bird feeders that brought a little wildlife close to the kitchen window. A beautiful backyard in that world was not always measured by how green or manicured the lawn looked. More often, it was measured by what that space could actually provide. Food on the table, a little independence from the grocery store, a sense that a home should give something back to the people living in it. This did not mean gardens were elaborate or that every family had the same setup. Plenty of yards were modest, just a few tomato plants in the corner, or a single fruit tree someone's parents had planted years earlier. But even in those smaller cases, the underlying idea remained the same. The yard was there to serve the household, not just to please the eye. For many families, gardening was not treated as a separate hobby that happened on the side. It was woven directly into the rhythm of the household, into chores, into meals, into the changing of the seasons. A Saturday morning might begin with the sound of a lawnmower starting up, followed by the quieter work of watering flower beds, checking tomato cages for damage from the previous night's wind, or repairing a section of fence that had come loose. A parent might spend an hour working in the yard before the day's other tasks took over, while a grandparent visiting for the weekend might quietly cut fresh herbs for that evening's dinner. Children would often wander in and out of that world in the way children do, sometimes helping because they were asked, sometimes watching from a distance, sometimes learning simply by being present. There were 4th of July cookouts held in backyards decorated with nothing more than string lights and folding chairs. Homemade lemonade served from a pitcher that had probably been in the family for years. Fruit picked straight from a tree in the corner of the yard, still warm from the sun. And extra vegetables passed over the fence to neighbors who had grown more squash than any single household could possibly use. In that sense, the backyard was never just about growing food. It was about building habits that repeated themselves year after year, about making certain rituals part of the family's shared story. A lot of the knowledge tied to backyard growing used to be ordinary, almost invisible because it was so deeply woven into daily life. People saved seeds from one season to plant the next, rather than buying new packets every spring. They composted kitchen scraps and yard waste as a matter of habit, not because it was trendy, but because it made practical sense. Many families built simple trellises out of leftover wood or wire, rotated where they planted certain crops from year to year to keep the soil healthy, preserved vegetables through canning or drying, to make a summer harvest last through winter. None of this was called a hack back then. It simply felt like the way things were done. That distinction matters. Today, many of these same ideas are being rediscovered as clever tricks for modern gardeners, and in a sense, they are worth rediscovering. But for earlier generations, they were not tricks at all. They were part of everyday competence, the kind of practical knowledge that lived quietly inside families and passed from one generation to the next. That kind of knowledge rarely came from instructions. The backyard was one of the places where it stayed alive. It taught people how to do it by requiring them to actually do it, season after season, mistake after mistake, until the knowledge became second nature. The backyard fed more than families in a purely nutritional sense. It taught patience, since plants do not grow faster just because someone wants them to. It taught responsibility, since a neglected garden showed the consequences quickly. And it gave children their first real understanding of where food comes from. That idea has deep roots in American history. Victory gardens during World War II made home food production feel both practical and patriotic, as millions of Americans planted vegetables in backyards, empty lots, and even public parks. In the years that followed, the suburban backyard took on a somewhat different role, shifting toward leisure and family life. But some of that same self-reliant spirit lingered on in smaller, quieter forms. During periods like the oil crisis of the 1970s and the high inflation that followed, growing food at home could also feel financially sensible. A backyard tomato plant was not going to replace a grocery bill entirely, but it could meaningfully reduce it. Yet the deeper value of all this was never only about money. It was about confidence, the feeling that a household could still produce something real with its own hands. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, everything began to change. The backyard did not disappear because one single thing replaced it. It would be misleading to tell this story as though there was a single villain or a single turning point. It changed because many things changed at once, gradually, over the course of decades. And those changes reinforced each other. That made the shift feel inevitable in hindsight, even though it never felt that way to the people living through it. Supermarkets became larger, more convenient, and better stocked. Processed and convenience foods became more common and more affordable. Fast food became a normal, everyday option rather than an occasional treat. At the same time, suburban culture increasingly placed value on the clean, uniform, chemically maintained lawn rather than the working, slightly untidy yard that had once produced food. In some neighborhoods, homeowners associations and informal social expectations pushed that visual ideal even further, sometimes actively discouraging vegetable gardens or clotheslines. At the same time, many families found themselves with less available time as working hours shifted and commuting patterns changed the rhythm of daily life. More work began happening indoors, in offices rather than yards. More leisure time began happening indoors too, in front of televisions and later video game consoles. Children spent measurably less time outdoors than previous generations had, and the knowledge that once moved naturally from grandparents to grandchildren had fewer and fewer chances to survive. Here, I want to offer my own reading of this shift, rather than simply listing causes. I do not think America lost the backyard because people stopped caring about food, family, or tradition. I think the backyard lost its function gradually, almost accidentally, as dozens of small, individually reasonable choices accumulated over decades. Buying vegetables instead of growing them was rational when time was scarce. Choosing a tidy lawn was rational when social norms rewarded it. None of these choices on their own look like the end of a tradition, but together, repeated across millions of households, they quietly emptied the backyard of much of its original purpose. That, to me, is the real turning point. America did not lose the backyard overnight. It slowly forgot what the backyard was for, one convenient decision at a time. However, some of those older habits are visibly coming back now, not as a perfect recreation of the past, but as a response to something many people feel has gone missing. Raised garden beds are appearing in yards that had nothing but lawn a decade ago. Heirloom seeds are popular again among gardeners chasing flavor and a tangible link to the past. People are planting fruit trees, building compost systems, and growing herbs on small balconies. Community gardens have expanded in cities, giving people without private yards a place to grow food and talk to neighbors. Farmers markets have grown steadily, offering a direct link between growers and consumers that supermarkets rarely provide. Even backyard chickens and homesteading language, once tied mainly to rural life, have found their way into suburban and urban settings. I do not think this is just a trend driven by aesthetics or social media. I think many people are searching for something that used to feel normal, even if they never personally grew up with a garden. They want a yard with purpose, food with a story, a home that produces something rather than only consuming. The revival is not really about nostalgia for its own sake. It is about quietly recovering a relationship with patience and self-reliance that many people sense has been missing. Maybe we never really lost the perfect American backyard. Maybe it simply became something fewer people built, and therefore something fewer people expected. The backyard people remember was never just grass and a mowed lawn. It was work, memory, and family routine, built slowly through repetition rather than any single dramatic moment. It was a place where tomatoes grew through a long summer, where children helped, sometimes reluctantly, and later remembered those afternoons more fondly than they expected to, where skills passed down quietly without anyone treating them as anything special. Maybe that quiet, unremarkable quality is exactly why the idea still feels powerful today. Every tomato plant started from a saved seed. Every fruit tree patiently waited for. Every child who learns where food comes from. Every seed saved for next season. These are not just gardening habits. They are pieces of a tradition that once quietly connected millions of American families. And perhaps the most important thing about that tradition is this: it was never truly gone. It was only waiting. the way a seed waits in the soil to be remembered. If this video resonated with you, subscribe for more videos about gardens, home life, and the history hiding behind the American way of living.